Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Vijay Raghavan, Professor, Center for Criminology and Justice, School of Social Work at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Today we are going to do a module called Criminology Trends and Perspective, which is part of the course on fields of practice in the broad discipline of social work. The objectives of this course, after reading this module or going through this module, you will be able to, number one, define or understand what is crime and what is criminology. You will be able to understand the actors involved in the occurrence of crime and criminal acts, and you will be able to understand the causes of crime and the responses to it. Now, when we start with defining crime, from time immemorial, we have been trying to understand what is crime and how do we define crime. Now, this, of course, will depend on the various perspectives in defining crime. We all come from different perspectives, and it will depend on the perspective that one has, that one would also use that as a way of defining crime. When you talk about types of crime, there is one is that there is a legal definition of crime, and the legal definition of crime basically consists of two parts, which is the act or omission. That is the first part of what can be defined as crime. There must be an act or an omission which is defined as something that should not, in terms of an act, it's something that should not be done. In terms of an omission, it is something that you're supposed to do but you don't do it. So it has to be an act or an omission, which is called actus rea. And the second part is that there should be an intention to commit the act or to omit not doing the act, and that is called as mens rea. So both actus rea and mens rea should be present when you are talking about what is defining as crime. The absence of either actus rea or mens rea does not qualify as a criminal act. According to Wayne Morrison, there are four frameworks that he has suggested when we are trying to understand or define crime. The first one is called crime as a social construction. Basically, this means that crime is something that is defined by society. It is society which decides what is crime and what is not a crime. Now, the best way to explain this is there are many acts which were a crime in earlier days, but today is not a crime. There were many acts which were not a crime in earlier days, and today it is a crime. Similarly, there are certain acts which are seen as a crime in one country but is not seen as a crime in another country. For example, Section 377, sex between consenting homosexual adults is seen as a crime in our country, but it is not seen as a crime in many countries. Then similarly, what was a crime at one given point of time is not necessarily a crime anymore, and vice versa. All of this tells us that at the end of the day, crime is a socially constructed category. It is society which decides what should be seen as a crime at a given point of time. The second perspective or framework is crime seen as a product of religious doctrine or authority. That is, whatever the religious texts tell us is to be seen as crime. So for example, abortion, which is seen as a crime in some religions, irrespective of what the law says, people who follow that faith consider abortion to be a crime. Third is crime as a reflection of nation-state legality. Here we are talking about the fact that whatever is defined by law as a crime should be seen as crime, and anything else is not to be seen as a crime. So for example, you may have social norms which go against the law, but the law is what will prevail at the end, is the perspective that some people have. And finally, you have another perspective which is emerging now, which is where crime is seen as something beyond the nation state. For example, the international war crimes that people have committed, that dictators have committed, that is all seen as beyond the nation state. In terms of categories of crime, there are broadly two categories: crimes against persons and crimes against property. But it is not always possible to categorize within the two categories. Sometimes they are intermixing with each other. In terms of another way to define crimes is you have public order crimes, which means crimes which are basically do not have a victim but still causing some kind of public disorder. For example, drug abuse. It does not have a victim. The person who is taking the drug does not go to the police station and complain. So he or she is not a victim, so-called. No? So these are called as public order crimes. Then you have political crimes, you have economic crimes like white-collar crimes, like frauds and economic offences, cybercrime. You have organized crime where gangs are involved. You have environmental crimes which are talking about degradation of the environment, industrial pollution, river pollution, etc., etc. The first time that criminology as a discipline was formally laid down in a book was by Edwin Sutherland, when he talked about the principles of criminology, and he said that criminology is the study of the entire process of making laws, of breaking laws, and reacting towards the breaking of laws. Sandra Walklate has put down 7 features of what is criminology. She talks about it as a discipline which is held together by a substantive concern, which is known as crime. She says that it's multidisciplinary in character, and it is important to understand the conceptual apparatus with which they might be working. Therefore, often it happens that criminologists frequently disagree with each other. But despite the disagreements, there is consensus that some of the features, for example, what constitutes the crime problem, but there is less agreement on how to solve the problem. Criminologists have been historically and continue to be concerned to offer some form of intervention in the policy-making process. These features of criminology sometimes resonate with popular common sense thinking about crime, and sometimes they challenge such thinking. And it is this kind of tension which is a perpetual challenge to the discipline, which means that criminologists don't always agree with the popular notions of crime and vice versa, and this creates a tension between the public and the criminologists, which is a healthy thing for the growth of the discipline. These debates are taking place more in a late modern society and increasingly preoccupied with crime, risk, and insecurity in society. Now we'll come to what we call as the criminological theories, and we have to first start with the classical theories, but because before classical theories, most theories were known as the demonological theories, which means that crime was seen as an incarnation of the evil. But the scientific process started with the classical school, and largely the contribution of Jeremy Bentham and Cesar Beccaria, who talked about, one is free will, that is, human beings act based on free will and based on rationalistic principles, and therefore crime also is based on the free will of the person and rational thinking. They also came up with the concept of the hedonistic calculus. Basically what they are saying is that human beings act on the basis of hedonism, which is the maximum pleasure and minimum pain. And the hedonistic calculus is, if we define the crimes on the basis of the harm that is being caused to society, then people will consider that before committing a crime. So smaller crime should have lesser punishment and larger crime should have more punishment. They also came up with the principle of general and specific deterrence, that the purpose of law is to deter other people from committing the crime, not to take revenge against the criminal. They also said that the punishment must fit the crime. So you cannot have a disproportionate punishment to the crime that is being committed. Bentham also came up with the idea of the panopticon, which is a specialized prison that he had designed, whereby there was a central tower and the cells were all around the prison, and from the central tower the prison officer could watch every prisoner, but the prisoner could not necessarily watch the main central guard who was guarding that central tower. And this was developed as an ideal institution which actually never was implemented except in one prison in America. Beccaria, on his essay on crime and punishment, said that human beings basically come together because they sign a social contract with one another, much like the social contract of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. The basis of the punishment should be basically legal. For example, he really advocated that there should be rule of law. That means every crime should be written down, and the role of the judge was to simply implement the law, not to interpret the law. He also said that punishment should be proportional to the crime, and it is more important to have certainty of punishment than the severity of the punishment. That means that if a crime is committed and there is swift punishment for that, and the trial process is finished fast, that will have a greater impact of deterrence than to have very strong and harsh punishments. He was totally opposed to capital punishment because his idea was that once a mistake is made, it cannot be reversed. And also that he was talking about a more humane society. The larger purpose of the criminal justice system, according to him, should be prevention of crime. Then we come to the biological theories. Here largely we have to talk about Cesare Lombroso, who is also known as the father of criminology. He believed that genes have something to do with people committing crimes, and he did a study of criminals in prisons and came up with certain physical characteristics, saying that people who are criminals have long earlobes, and they have long hands and all kinds of deformities, etc. Today his theory has been rejected as something, but he's still seen as the father of criminology because he was the first person to actually do a scientific study, collect empirical data, and then on that basis he came with his findings. Charles Goring wrote The English Convict, where he did a larger study, and he said that this Lombroso's theory doesn't hold because he studied both people inside prison and outside jail, and he found the same characteristics in both populations. Then we come to the William Sheldon, who talked about the fact that there are 3 types of body types: the endomorphic bodies, which are those little chubby like me. You have the ectomorphic people, who are skinny people, and then you have the mesomorphs, who are the muscular people, and it is the mesomorphs who are more prone to committing criminal acts. Then you come to the psychobiological theories. Patricia Jacob, who talked about the XYY chromosome in males and linked it up with violent behavior. The concept of the super male is what the XYY, so that is, these are people who have an extra Y chromosome in their body. Mednick, who did a study on genes and crime, studied a group of non-familial adoptions in Denmark between 1924 and 1947, and found that the biological parents repeat crime behavior, which is otherwise known as recidivism, has an effect on the convictions of the sample adopted families. Psychological theories, we'll talk about Hans Eysenck, who came up with the personality-based questionnaire and identified personality traits, basically neuroticism and psychoticism. And he said that extroverted people are more likely to commit criminal behavior than the introverted people. Then there's Sigmund Freud. Everybody knows about his contribution, his ego and superego, and the conflict between the ego and the superego, leading to certain kinds of repressed sexual desires, which finally leading to criminal behavior. Then we come to the social learning theories, which talk about the behavioral conditioning, that people can be conditioned to either commit criminal behavior or they can be conditioned to behave normal non-criminal behavior. We then now come to the psychosocial theories. Here we can talk about Edwin Sutherland's theory of differential association. Basically what he said is people learn behavior in groups. So criminal behavior can also be learned in groups. And you not only learn the techniques of committing the crime, but you also learn the motives, the drives, the rationalizations, and the attitudes which are so much necessary for criminal behavior. Now what begins to happen is that there is a shift from psychological and biological theories to sociological theories. The first one we can talk about is Durkheim, Emil Durkheim, who said that crime is a very normal phenomenon in society because crime disturbs the equilibrium in society, and crime tells us the boundaries of legal behavior in a society. And also the law produces solidarity, brings people together so that the deviant can be punished. Robert Merton developed this theory further and talked about crime as an imbalance between culturally accepted goals and institutionally available means. He came up with 5 modes of adaptation. When people, what basically he said is that goals everybody accepts, but means everybody doesn't have. So when you don't have the means, you have to adapt. So one way of adapting is by conforming. The second one is by innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. You can read more about it in the notes that have been circulated. Albert Cohen, who talked about delinquent boys and the delinquent subculture theory, which was further developed by Cloward and Olin, who talked about it more as opportunity theories. That is, whenever young boys come together from a particular background and they are likely to rebel against it if then opportunity exists. One of the important contributions to Chicago School, which is known as Chicago School mainly because that was a phase when there were a lot of criminologists and sociologists from Chicago University together working on issues of crime and deviance, is Shaw and McKay, who did ecological mapping of the city, and they came up with concentric circles whereby they found that certain areas were more crime prone than the other areas, and they found that those areas where there was physical and social decay and there was great amount of heterogeneity and mobility, these were the areas where the crime rates were high. So this actually helped in understanding that there are certain areas which can be improved and then the crime rate can be brought down. Then we come to what are known as social control theories, and again Walter Reckless, who came to India, was one of the important theorists. He talked about the containment theory. Basically he said that there are two types of containment: inner containment and an outer containment in all of us as human beings. The inner containment includes the favorable self-concept, goal orientation, frustration tolerance. Outer containment is a structural buffer in the immediate social and family surroundings, consisting of, moral norms, ideology, goals, etc., etc. And then there are push and pull factors like poverty and family conflict, etc. So the inner containment, the outer containment, the push and the pull factors together decide whether a person is likely to go into crime or not. There was Hershey's study, which is called the attachments theory, where he said that the chances of a person committing a crime is dependent on four factors: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief in society. If you have greater attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief, your chances of committing crime are much lower. Then there's David Matza, who came up with his neutralization theory, and he said that as long as we are able to neutralize the commission of criminal acts by rationalizations, we will be able to commit criminal acts. And he talked about 5 types of rationalizations. Denial of injury, that means you deny that you committed any harm to others. Denial of the victim, you say that that person deserved it, so you deny that there was a victim at all. Condemnation of condemners, that means you pick on the people who actually are supposed to pick on you. So you say, what right does the police have to do, have to make a judgment on me? They are as corrupt or worse than me. Then you have appeal to higher loyalties. For example, people who get involved in terrorist crimes are people who are doing it for a so-called larger cause. And so these are some of the rationalizations that you have. But then they went on, he also further later on said that nobody remains in criminal mentality throughout. Basically, the delinquent, somebody is somebody who drifts in and out of crime depending on the opportunities that are available. Finally, you had the general theory of crime proposed by Gottfriedson and Hershey, where they tried to combine all the existing theories that had been developed so far and tried to build it into one comprehensive theory. Not very successful. They talked about what is crime, defined crime as acts of force or fraud, and linked it to low self-control and criminal behavior. Then we come to what are known as the interactionist theories. Basically, the interactionist school believes that any human behavior is based on the meanings that we give to the things and interactions that happen with each other as human beings in society. The first important, and 2 people are important here initially, Frank Tannenbaum and Edward Lemert. They came up with the concept of labeling theory, whereby they tried to prove that it is because of the labeling process that people become criminals. Actually, everybody has an equal chance of committing crime. Some people get caught and some people don't. The ones who get caught are then labeled and tagged as criminals, and then it becomes impossible for them to come out of it. So this is, and then also Lemert came up with the concept of primary and secondary deviance. He said all of us are primary deviants, that means we all have a chance of committing a crime, but secondary deviance happens after the labeling process. Howard Becker came up with a path-breaking book called Outsiders, where he talked about the social audience, whereby he said that basically we all behave according to what our social audience wants us to behave. And based on this, he came up with a categorization of a typology of labels that get attached to us as deviants. One is the falsely accused person. That means he has not committed a crime, but he gets labeled as a criminal. The pure deviant is somebody who has committed a crime and accepts that he has committed a crime. The conformist, who does not commit any infractions or illegal acts. And the secret deviant is somebody who is not yet caught, is continuing to behave in a criminal manner. And he says that deviance is largely created by the audience reaction. So if the audience reaction is strong, the chances of the deviant act is also strong. Then there is Goffman, who basically his contribution is to, one is the concept of total institutions, where he talked about prisons, mental health centers, custodial institutions, and said that institutions create a moral career of a person inside, where there is a pre-patient, inpatient, and an ex-patient phase. And because of the process of institutionalization, the person completely loses his self-esteem, undergoes various kinds of physical deformities because of the torture that the person, blemishes of individual character, labeling through a process of continuous, naming and shaming of the person, and then the tribal stigma of race, nation, and religion, which gets transmitted from individual to the family of the person. Entire families and communities then get labeled as criminal communities. And the person is first stigmatized, and then later on the person becomes what the stigma and the label has been put on that person. Finally, we come to the beginning of the leftist theories, which starts with the radical and the conflict school. Now here the whole element is on looking at class element and adding the ethnic component to it, basically looking at the fact that there are haves and have-nots in society, and crime is an outcome of the conflict that's going on between the haves and the have-nots in society. Richard Queeny, who was one of the pioneers in this radical theories, said that the radical school, the focus is on the political economy of capitalism and crime. What is the relationship between capitalism and crime? That capitalism produces certain kinds of phenomena which then get labeled as crime. For example, theft can be seen as an outcome of the gap that is there between the haves and the have-nots. Conflict criminology draws from labeling theories and see crime as defined by agencies of the criminal justice system, and conflict is an eternal process through which change comes by, and therefore crime should also be seen as a category which is changing continuously as a result of the conflict that's going on between the classes as well as between the ethnic groups that exist in society. Then we come to feminist criminology, because they have made a major contribution to understand. And one of the main criticisms was that, mainstream criminology was also male-stream criminology, in the sense that they were largely about men committing crimes, and the criminologists were also largely men. So they started asking questions about why is it that we are not looking at female crime? And especially they started talking about the fact that why is it that we are not looking about certain types of crimes that are committed against women. For example, rape, domestic violence. These kind of crimes have never been studied by criminologists, and therefore they stretched the concerns of criminology from criminology to a new discipline which emerged called victimology. And feminist criminologists have a very important role to play. They also looked at issues like the treatment of women within the criminal justice system. They focused more on oppression of women and the social conditions in which women live, rather than on simple individual behavior that was the focus of the earlier criminologists. Their larger understanding was that the crimes can also be looked at in terms of the focus and in terms of understanding the whole issue of sexuality. And socialist feminism concerns itself with the interaction of race, class, and sex all together. Finally, we come to critical criminology theories. One of the people who we can talk about, Jock Young, who talks about in his book Exclusive Society, says that today we are living in times where there are three types of social exclusion taking place. Exclusion of people from the economic market in terms of the labor force. Social exclusion, where large sections of society are getting excluded from civil society, but expansion of the criminal justice system, which is excluding more and more people from their daily lives. So this is the kind of society in which we are looking at. Postmodernism brought in its own understanding that there are no grand theories left now to understand, and we need to really look at micro studies and multiple realities, because there is no one reality. The importance and the contribution of Michel Foucault, through his book Discipline and Punish, was really an important contribution, and the ideas of risk society and David Garland's theory on culture of high crime societies are some of the theories that we need to look at. Finally, why are we studying all these theories is what we need to look at, because this module is on criminal justice social work, and this course module is a part of the larger module. Social work is concerned about intervention in spaces where crime occurs and where people come in contact with the criminal justice system. And if we are to understand that social work is all about addressing some of the larger social inequalities, we need to understand crime not only from an individualistic perspective, but from a larger social structural perspective. This course has helped us to understand that crime is a very complex phenomena, that crime cannot be understood only through one definition, and it's only when we have a multi-layered understanding of crime that we will be able to at least address some of the issues and problems that people face when they are caught in the web of the criminal justice system. Thank you.